Imagine going on a peaceful hike, surrounded by trees, fresh air, and silence. Now imagine that silence hiding a killer. In late 2007, a series of brutal murders across the southeastern United States exposed one of the most disturbing predators to ever stalk America's wilderness. His victims weren't taken from dark alleys or abandoned roads. They were abducted from hiking trails, forest paths, and remote outdoor areas, places people normally went to feel safe. The man responsible was 𝙈𝙧𝙧𝙮, an aging drifter with a calm appearance and a horrifying secret. This is the story of the man who became known as the National Forest Killer. By the time 𝙈𝙧𝙧𝙮 was finally caught, he didn't look like the kind of man most people would fear. He was older, in his 60s, soft-spoken, and often described as a drifter who moved through campgrounds and wooded areas. But behind that unassuming appearance was a violent predator who investigators say targeted vulnerable people in isolated outdoor spaces. Hilton had spent years living a transient lifestyle, traveling through parts of Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina. He knew the forests. He knew the trails. And prosecutors would later argue that he used those remote places to his advantage, because in the wilderness, help is far away and witnesses are even farther. But in early 2008, one disappearance would finally put his name in the spotlight. On New Year's Day 2008, 24-year-old Meredith Emerson went hiking on Blood Mountain in North Georgia with her dog, Ella. It was supposed to be a normal hike. Instead, it became the beginning of a nightmare. When Meredith didn't return, concern quickly turned into panic. Search teams began combing the area, and witnesses came forward saying they had seen Meredith on the trail with an older man. Then investigators uncovered even more alarming evidence. Meredith's bank card had been used after she vanished. That trail of clues led directly to 𝙈𝙧𝙧𝙮. After his arrest, Hilton eventually confessed to abducting Meredith for robbery. He admitted he had kept her alive for days and later murdered her, beating her to death with a tire iron. He then led authorities to her body. The case shocked the country, but what made it even worse was the realization that Meredith was not his first victim. Just weeks before Meredith Emerson's murder, another victim had vanished. In December 2007, Cheryl Dunlap, a 46-year-old nurse and Sunday school teacher, disappeared after visiting the 𝙈𝙖𝙧𝙧𝙮 geological area in Florida. Her body was later discovered in a wooded area. Investigators said Hilton kidnapped Cheryl, murdered her, and tried to destroy evidence afterward. Years later, he was convicted of her killing and sentenced to death in Florida. But the horror didn't stop there. Authorities also linked Hilton to the murders of John and Irene Bryant, an elderly couple hiking in Pisgah National Forest, North Carolina, in October 2007. Irene Bryant was found beaten to death near where the couple had parked. John Bryant vanished. According to prosecutors, Hilton kidnapped him, forced him to reveal financial information, and then murdered him too. John's remains were later found months after Irene's death. By then, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Hilton wasn't just a killer. He was hunting people in remote forests, robbing them, abducting them, and leaving devastation across multiple states. As the full picture emerged, investigators connected 𝙈𝙧𝙧𝙮 to 4 known murders: John Bryant, Irene Bryant, Cheryl Dunlap, and Meredith Emerson. He eventually received multiple life sentences, along with a death sentence in Florida for Cheryl Dunlap's murder. The media began calling him the National Forest Killer, a name that captured exactly what made his crimes so terrifying. Hilton turned places of peace into crime scenes. Trails, forests, and nature reserves, places where people went to clear their minds, exercise, or spend time with family, became hunting grounds. And perhaps the most chilling part of all, 𝙈𝙧𝙧𝙮 was already in his 60s when these murders happened. He didn't fit the image many people have of a serial killer. He didn't look especially threatening, and that may have made him even more dangerous. Today, 𝙈𝙧𝙧𝙮 remains one of the most disturbing killers tied to America's wilderness. His known murder spree may have spanned only a short period, but the fear it created lasted far longer. For the families of Meredith Emerson, Cheryl Dunlap, John Bryant, and Irene Bryant, the damage can never be undone. Because Gary Hilton didn't just take lives. He took something else too, the sense of safety people feel when they step into nature alone. And after his crimes, the quiet of the forest no longer sounded the same. Imagine driving down a quiet stretch of highway late at night. The road is empty. The world feels still. Safe, even. But in the early 1980s, along the highways of the American Midwest, that silence hid something terrifying. Young men began disappearing across Indiana, Illinois, and neighboring states. Some were hitchhikers. Some were sex workers. Others were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Their bodies were found dumped in fields, along roadsides, and in isolated rural areas, many of them stabbed repeatedly and brutally mutilated. At the center of it all was a man named Larry Eyler, a house painter with a violent secret, a serial killer who would later be linked to more than 20 murders. Between 1982 and 1984, authorities began noticing a pattern. Young men were being found dead near highways and remote roads, often showing signs of extreme violence. Because the killings happened across multiple states, it took time for investigators to realize they were connected. As the evidence grew, suspicion turned toward Larry Eyler. Then in 1984, the case against him exploded when the dismembered remains of 16-year-old Daniel Bridges were found in garbage bags outside an apartment building in Chicago. Investigators linked the murder directly to Eyler, and he was arrested. As police dug deeper, they connected him to more killings. But the full horror of Eyler's crimes wasn't revealed until 1994, when he was dying on death row. Just before his death, Eyler confessed to killing 21 young men and boys between 1982 and 1984. It was a devastating revelation, one that gave some families long-awaited answers, while raising even more questions about how long he had gotten away with it. Larry Eyler became known as the Highway Killer because he used America's roads almost like hunting grounds, moving from place to place while bodies kept turning up behind him. He looked ordinary. He had jobs, routines, and relationships. But behind that normal appearance was a predator who turned miles of open highway into a map of fear. And by the time the truth came out, more than 20 lives had been stolen, their bodies scattered across roadsides and forgotten places, leaving behind a legacy of horror that still haunts true crime history.